This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. And so it'll be Paris Saint-Germain taking on Inter Milan in the final of the Champions League. In the end, it was comfortable for PSG. Arsenal, though, were brilliant for 20 minutes. Rice headed wide, and then Donnarumma saved brilliantly from Martinelli, and the strongest palm wide from Martin Odegaard. But then PSG got into gear. Fabián Ruiz took one lovely touch and smashed it home. And after that, Arsenal struggled to create. In one of those penalties, someone changed the rules, please. And someone let us know when Vitinha finishes his run-up. Hakimi scored shortly afterwards, and although Saka scored one and missed another, the Gunners fell short. So 1 trophy in 6 years for Arteta. Is that enough? He has improved this team so much, and in doing so has changed the expectations. No one's asked this before, but do they need a striker? Also today, a brief look ahead to Thursday's European action. Pod special out tomorrow on that. The race for 5th place, the race for 8th place. Your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, welcome.
Hello, Max.
Mike says the Auclair Bandini nexus drops to a 50% success rate. Yes, Nicky Bandini, hello.
Morning. Sorry, guys.
Bonjour, ça va, Philippe Auclair? Je suis désolé.
Oui, moi aussi.
Bonjour, c'est bon. All right. So PSG are through then. They won 2-1 last night, 3-1 on aggregate. That means they knocked out Liverpool, Aston Villa and Arsenal on their way to the final. Is it fair to say, Philippe, over 2 legs, the better side won?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody would say anything different. The better side in London, the better side for perhaps 2/3 of the game in Paris. And I can't say it's very much of a huge surprise. Quite a few people had Arsenal favourites for some reason against PSG, but no. I have to say that I'll have some regrets like everybody else will have, because even if Arsenal totally went through their game the wrong way in the first leg, in the second, my goodness, they had exactly the right attitude. They did exactly the right thing. Unfortunately, that's what happens when you come across a team which has got a goalkeeper who's got the span of an albatross, and who has also some other fairly gifted birds to go along with the big one. There's some regrets, because honestly, the way they prepared that second game was absolutely superb. They were as good in Paris as Paris had been in London for the first 20 minutes. And that's a very, very high compliment. But in the end, if you look at it, you might regret, yes, the chances which have been missed, the fact that they have a fantastic keeper, ×2, the fact that when they still had a chance to get back into the game, Hakimi scored and that was the end of it. That's it. All the air was knocked out. So regrets, yes, but at the same time, I think definitely the sense that progress has been made in the performances, but as well, I think it shows into quite sharp light what is still missing from that Arsenal team. All the things that we can eulogize about, the fact that they really turned up last night. There's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to regret, really, about last night. But yes, I know. I see Nicky going a bit like a Ringo Starr, Naughty Dog in the Beatles car at the back. And maybe there are things to regret, but I don't want to admit it.
Philippe, you're saying regrets. You've had a few, but enough that you can mention all of them in a 2-minute piece on the podcast. Look, you're right. That first 20 minutes, Nicky, they were brilliant. You know, Jimmy says, would Donnarumma have saved Barry's header? Like, I guess the point is they had to score when they had that dominance. And it is hard, isn't it? If Alexander Isak, apologies Newcastle fans, were playing for them, it doesn't mean that Donnarumma wouldn't have saved that shot from Martin Odegaard, I guess, you know.
Yeah, the regrets question is complicated, isn't it? Because there's layers to that. And one layer is, should it be a regret for Arsenal that they didn't act in January when they knew that there was this situation beginning to develop with the lack of strikers? Absolutely, I think that should be a regret. And I think that PSG are a great model for actually you can do things in January that help you a lot, because Kvaratskhelia has been absolutely critical to them reaching this Champions League final. So you can do business in January if you're smart about it. You have to be smart about it, but you can do things that help your team get to where they're trying to go. In a more specific sense, I think there's still some room for regrets on the pitch too. I think even at incredibly, even at 3-2 down in the tie, there is that moment where Saka goes through and he's just scored once. And you think if he takes a chance a second time, who knows? Because PSG have their own demons. They have their own past and things that might cause them to wobble in that moment and panic. So there are things. And on the other side of that, there is Donnarumma. And it's a thing I've been musing on since last night is how we talk about goalkeepers, because it almost feels like when we talk about this game, it's who deserves what and who did what. And deserve somehow doesn't include the fact that having a really good goalkeeper might help you deserve it a bit more, because he's part of the team. There was a moment when it was actually still only 1-0 on the night, another Saka chance. There was that one where he tries to lift it over from the right-hand side, and it's one of those saves where you think if it's just a normal-sized goalkeeper instead of Donnarumma, who's this absolute, as you were saying, albatross, maybe they don't quite get the fingertips to it and it sneaks in. And the camera cuts to Saka and he's just shaking his head and doing this little shrug like, what are we supposed to do about this? It's not fair. It's not fair. They're not allowed to have that guy there in the way. And I think there's an understandable some of that in Arsenal's feeling about it. It's not fair that they're allowed to have a keeper that good, but yeah, it's part of your team having a keeper who's that good.
Yeah. The wingspan of an albatross, by the way, is 3 meters. Which feels about
that's about
feels
right.
accurate for Donnarumma, doesn't it? And like that for PSG to score. I mean, it wasn't their first. Kvaratskhelia hit the post, hadn't they, Barry? But then Ruiz, it feels like they've done nothing. PSG, and his first touch was. I mean, both touches were pretty good, to be fair.
Can I just start by saying I was aware coming into this podcast that I was going to be on with 2 Arsenal fans, and I was wondering, right, do I need to be the pantomime villain who gets really stuck into the Arsenal here for their latest failure? But I think there's 2 ways you can frame the outcome of this tie. The first is to say that Arsenal were plucky, valiant losers, that they played well for extended periods over 2 legs at the end of a season in which they lost several key players to injury and were forced to play half of it without a recognised striker. And then they've come up with this nation state-owned evil behemoth who had a goalkeeper in such inspirational form, and that was a bit unlucky. And then the second way to frame it, I suppose, is to say that having been reduced to Pulis era Stoke tactics, this team of serial bottlers who are backed by a Trump apologist American billionaire who have spent £700 million on players in 4 years and who play in a stadium called the Emirates and wear badges on their sleeves urging people to go on holidays to an African state run by a bloodthirsty dictator, have come up short again. They've lost their 4th semi-final in a row. They've lost their 2nd semi-final this season. They've lost all 4 legs of both these semi-finals. And this is a season in which they were expected to challenge for the title, but they're 15 points off the pace and might not even finish 2nd. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between.
I mean, I must say.
What was your question?
My question was about Fabián Ruiz's first touch, actually. I mean, I'll go to Philippe on that because it really was. I mean, it's an excellent answer to a question I didn't ask, Barry, but that's fine.
Well, I will say, in answer to your question, Arsenal had 3 good chances, didn't score from any of them. PSG then created 3 good chances in a row, scored one of them. There's your difference. And in the goal they did score, the goal Ruiz scored, was very similar to the goal Odegaard didn't score, if you get my drift. Yeah. The difference being that Donnarumma saved Odegaard's shot, Raya didn't save Ruiz.
It took a little deflection, didn't it? But the way he
did. No, I'm not blaming Raya. I'm just the fine margins, Max.
Yeah, I actually almost hesitate to call the goal that Fabián Ruiz scored a chance, because so few players would be able to execute what he did. That probably in XG is probably 0.01 or something like that. The clarity of mind, of thought he had for the first touch to set himself, and then the execution. I mean, the point of impact between the boot and the ball is just absolutely exquisite, isn't it? It's amazing that the point of impact in itself is exquisite. It's perfection. And then the trajectory of the ball is perfection. And the pace of the ball is such that it seems to go slowly. which is a typical thing of really quick strikes. And no, it's one of the purest strikes I've seen all season, I must say. And completely out of the blue. But this being said, the fact that Fabián Ruiz is an exceptional footballer is not exactly something that we didn't know about before that.
That is true. And I guess, Nicky, in a bit like how at the Emirates, that Dembele goal knocked the stuffing out of Arsenal a bit. You felt the same here, that because they'd been so good and they hadn't scored and then PSG did, that it just took them. I don't know if they ever really got going again.
Yeah, goals change games. It's absolutely true in this entire tie. We talked about it last week when we were talking about the atmosphere at the Emirates and how PSG scoring so early just sucked everything out of the stadium and how that energy then ends up defining the entire, certainly at least the whole first half of that game, I think. And of course, it's easy to go, oh yes, if Declan Rice puts his header on target, if Donnarumma doesn't make that incredible save from Odegaard, the game is different. Of course it is. That's how football works. When the ball goes in, the game changes because the score changes and how everyone acts changes around that. I think that while it's true that we can sort of make that simplistic point, completely valid point, but simplistic point that Fabián Ruiz is an excellent footballer, like PSG are more than the sum of their parts. PSG absolutely deserve in this conversation. And of course, we're coming at it from the point of view of a couple of Arsenal fans on the podcast and the fact that we've got probably a majority English-speaking audience. But PSG under Luis Enrique have absolutely gone to a level that is beyond anything they've managed in these past years of trying to win the Champions League. It's a team that has an incredibly clear identity, a team that has recruited to that identity, to bring it back to Kvaratskhelia, someone who is not just a brilliant dribbler. And it's really thrilling as someone who has seen him emerge at Napoli and then just not really be a good fit with Antonio Conte. It has to be said, I know Conte was gutted to lose him in the middle of the season, but he wasn't a great fit with him in terms of what was happening on the pitch. And he was looking like a shadow of himself, not completing nearly as many dribbles as he did. And he's gone to somewhere in PSG where Luis Enrique has all at once managed to empower those forwards, give himself those players with that ability to run and to be brave and to take the spaces they want to, but also who are going to track back and defend and work hard. And I think Kvaratskhelia is really, really impressive as a player who does all of that. And I think there's all sorts of players in that team who I see just playing at levels that they weren't always elsewhere. I think Fabián Ruiz is playing at an incredible level. I think Hakimi, whose goal was really, really well struck and had a great night. Again, the levels these guys are getting to, it's of course about their talent, but I do think Luis Enrique has done an extraordinary job there this season.
I think we should also have a word for the one player who is, in a way, the link between all of the PSGs of the past few years. Somebody who comes from Italy as well, and as so many did, with Marquinhos, who was at Roma, wasn't he? He's now in his 12th or 13th year at PSG, which is extraordinary when you think about it. What is amazing is that this man who has been through all the stages of the PSG transformations, metamorphoses, whatever you want to call them, the PSG of Zlatan and Beckham, but also the PSG of Neymar, and also the PSG of Messi, and also the PSG of Mbappe, and all of this, and now the PSG of Luis Enrique, and he's there, and he's the captain, and he's the one player who has kept everything together the whole time through. And I think he deserves a big pat on the back for that. And he's also a player, whereas there are quite a few players who went to PSG I can think of were attracted by the lifestyle in Paris, the monies that they would be given. I think Marquinhos actually, he actually does a genuine love for that club, which is very difficult thing to imagine, to have love for a club like PSG. But and the way he connects with the fans, by the way, is also quite unique. In a way, he harks back, when I say that, he almost harks back to the PSG before Qatar, if you see what I mean. But he's, and I don't think he's spoken about enough, as well as being a bloody good central defender, it must be said.
Yeah. He's eschewed the bright lights of Paris to focus on his football. If I'm allowed a minute on that penalty, Barry. Oh my! I just can someone. I don't know who to look for. Arsene Wenger's not going to change the law because he's too worried about daylight offside, which we shouldn't get to because it's an absolutely ridiculous idea. But how anybody thinks there was actually, I saw Noz tweeted this out or put it on Instagram. There's all these Arsenal fans at Box Park Wembley. And it goes potential penalty check. And they're all like, yes, we've got a penalty because the ball was up the Arsenal end. And obviously no one had a clue what it was for. Like no one on the pitch, no one in the stadium, none of the officials, none of the coaches, no fan anywhere in the world was like, we were just like, oh, there's a potential penalty check. Could be anywhere. Could be one of these teams, could be a different match. I don't know. and it is a scandal that is a penalty. And it's a scandal that people now accept that as a penalty. We just accept it. And I know I'm shouting at you, Barry, and you are very much the cloud, and I am the old man, and I don't know what to do about it.
I don't disagree with you. Can I say that straight off the bat? I do not disagree with you. But if I can play devil's advocate, isn't the whole point of VAR to bring in to correct mistakes that we didn't see? So the fact that nobody saw it doesn't matter, and technically it's a handball. Now, I think Achraf Hakimi clocked it and then wasn't sure. He kind of did a double take and looked at the ref. And then when the ref didn't do anything, he could just kind of shrug his shoulders and ambled away and played on. I could be wrong. That's my read on the situation. So technically it is a penalty, but it shouldn't be a penalty. And you are right. I don't think maybe Hakimi noticed. Presumably Miles Lewis-Skelly noticed. But nobody else did. But isn't that why VAR is there?
If it's why it's there, that's the reason why it should go.
Well, I agree. I don't like VAR, and I'm not disagreeing with Max. I'm just being devil's advocate.
No, well, it's very kind of you to add some balance to this, but I don't believe there should be any balance.
Barry Balance, that's what they call me.
Do we think Vitinha took pity with that absolutely dreadful penalty?
Yes, I know.
I have to say, I'm super glad he missed the penalty. Because if he had scored it, God almighty, can you imagine the wailing and the gnashing of teeth? That would have been, yeah, I'm glad he missed.
I don't know if you guys saw, but when it cut to the referee coming from the VAR screen, it did kind of look like he was almost doing like an apologetic gesture. It was like, I've got to give it. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to give it, but it is. So, yeah.
And he's by the way, Mr. Swan, he's a very, very fine referee, and the refereeing was actually completely, almost perfect. But what can he do? Because if he ignores what his team has, he's not responsible.
It's the rule, and it's been quite consistently applied in European games. I know people are upset about it because it doesn't look like one, and it made me think about Gigi Buffon against Real Madrid accusing Michael Oliver of having a dustbin for a heart, because how heartless to make that be a way that we punish an 18-year-old for something that isn't even a mistake. But it is the way the rule's been applied. It is. And the rule, I agree, I don't like and would be very happy to see it changed. But you can't have a go at the referee for that.
No.
He's doing their job.
I don't blame the referee at all. I'm just saying if you're determined to penalise them, make it a free kick. But don't penalise it. It's just sometimes the ball hits a hand. Anyway, I will do this, no doubt, again and again and again.
Well, Max, it's this thing that I keep harping about, that handball, which is not voluntary, should be indirect free kick, mayhem in the area, and we would all love it.
I agree. You touched on this, Barry, earlier, but Chris says, after Arteta changed his tactics to long throws instead of corners, which big man up top should Arsenal now target? Ian Marshall and Ian Ormondroyd considering coming out of retirement, do you think? Sonny says, do Arsenal need a throwing coach to get them over the line next season? Russ, if his name was Michael Arthur and was relying on set pieces and long throws, would he be given so many chances, or would he be called a footballing dinosaur? I love a long throw. It was funny to see Thomas Partey trudging from one side to the other. I don't know, like from an Arsenal perspective, Nicky, if you were sort of slightly thought, these tactics are have Arsenal gone a bit one-dimensional, or is that too harsh?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things that you're inclined to question. I was agreeing with Baz actually when he was talking about the throw-ins in the first half, but at the same time, they nearly get a goal from one of those throw-ins, don't they? The first one, Martinelli nearly managed to do something with it. So, yeah, I think that it felt in the second half to me like Arsenal felt the need to be more direct. And so they were looking for those straight balls. But when those weren't working, it wasn't like there was another plan anymore. That the first half obviously was I thought, certainly the first 20 minutes pretty effectively approached and had PSG on the back foot. But the second half, it almost felt like the tactics were desperate because it was just, let's just pump it in there and see if we can get somewhere, which PSG's defenders were dealing with very well. But it was that strategy, and then not even accompanied by the kind of urgency that that you might have wanted. I was surprised we didn't see Ranieri. I think when you're struggling to get goals and you need goals, then I accept that it would have been nice for there to have been better recruitment designed towards that. But use the players you've got who've scored some goals. So the second half, I didn't feel like the approach felt like it was ever likely going to get somewhere, even though, of course, I said before, there were still chances. Saka did still score and could have scored again.
I think, to be the devil's advocate, which seems to be a role that is going from one to the other in this podcast, the direct approach, first of all, Thomas Partey, the long throws. Every Arsenal fan knows that we are the worst team at throw-ins in the Premier League. Be it Timber, Lewis Skelly, Ben White is the worst of the lot. We are the worst at throw-ins. So I'm actually applauding the Lap's reincarnation. That's absolutely fine. Second thing, everybody agreed before the game that one of the possible weak points of this PSG was their problems with dealing with balls in the box, and that Donnarumma, exceptional as he is, sometimes was short-circuiting on long balls, was a little bit too eager to grab them, and that could actually lead to something. So they tested that. And then also, as a number 9, you have Mikel Merino, who is excellent in the air, who, by the way, I thought had a terrific game last night. Honestly, I thought he did everything he could possibly do. He did very well. And he actually won quite a lot of 50-50s in the air. But the difference is there were not really many other solutions, because out of nowhere, or rather after they had opened the scoring, the PSG midfield rediscovered its ability to press in tight areas. Wherever you looked at the ball in the possession of an Arsenal player, you could actually draw a kind of circle, which would be about 10 yards in radius, and you would have 5 PSG players present there. I don't know how they do it. I mean, that's basically down to very, very, very good coaching and very, very good players. But suddenly, Arsenal didn't have the solutions they had in the first half, where sometimes Martin Odegaard had some space. Declan Rice could actually race from midfield. Suddenly, these opportunities were not open to them. And yeah, you have to try your luck at making the game a bit different and playing it long. So it could have worked. It didn't work, because PSG were too good, and that's it.
Barry, quite a few questions on Arteta and his position. Jordan says that despite how good Arsenal were, and also up to the semi-final, it's another season without a trophy for Arsenal. Now, 5 years since their last. Considering how people talk about Arteta, should they have won more in that time? Jelly Belly says, surely Arteta only has one more year, another trophyless season. Club's transfer business in the summer and January was a complete shambles. Squad is miles away from being good enough, tactically naive. Third game in a row leaving a player unmarked on the edge of the box. I mean, I suppose Ruiz did get away from Martinelli, didn't he? Mess, he says. Anyway, Arteta out. Is that what you're crying for here, Baz?
Well, I don't care who manages Arsenal, to be personally, but I found Arteta's comments after the game, where he appeared to suggest that Arsenal were the better team over 2 legs, to be completely delusional. They've lost 4 semi-finals in a row under him. They lost 2 semi-finals this season. They lost both legs of both those semi-finals. And you could say they were very comfortably beaten by Newcastle, pretty comfortably beaten by PSG. They were supposed to challenge for the title this season and take advantage of any potential City slip-ups. They're currently second, 15 points off the pace. They might not even finish second. It doesn't really matter whether they finish second, third or fourth. And I think Arsenal's failure to sign a striker in January borders on negligence, to be honest. But I don't know how much of that is Arteta's fault. I don't know if Arsenal's owner cares about winning silverware. At Manchester United, the Glazers, they don't care about winning trophies. and it might be the same as Arsenal. I know it's difficult to sign a striker in January and they're not growing on trees, but I still maintain that if they'd made a serious offer for someone like, and Philippe and Nicky might laugh, Jamie Vardy, he could have come in and done a job for them. Despite his age, he's a very good goal scorer. Leicester, it was obvious they were going down. They might have taken 10 million for him. I'd say they'd have snapped anyone's hand off if they'd offered 10 million for them. Arsenal have definitely improved under Arteta, but they do seem to lack that winning mentality and killer instinct.
I don't know. I'm aware that I can sometimes be inclined towards sitting in the middle anyway on these things, but I do think there's sometimes a loss of perspective. Arsenal did just go to a Champions League semi-final for the first time in, I think it's 16 years. It's not an old squad. It's not a squad which you look at and go, oh, that was the one chance and we're at the end of it. There is every possibility to take this season and build on it. The second place thing, I think to talk about the points gap, in my opinion, is a bit false because it's very obvious that Arsenal have taken their foot off the pedal the last few rounds, have been trying to concentrate on the Champions League, rightly or wrongly. And I think that some of those points, it's a bit of an exaggeration. It is going to come down to whether they recruit properly. It is going to come down to whether or not they fix this. Things I'm hearing is that certainly Arteta wants to recruit quite aggressively in a couple of positions. We'll see what comes to pass, but I do think there is sometimes what feels to me like the classic social media driven need to make this all or nothing and to make it either terrible or perfect. And I think it's not for me either of those things.
Whatever about the points gap, Nicky, I would argue you look at Arsenal and no matter who they recruit during the summer, I think, is there any chance of them winning the title next season? No.
I disagree with that. I do actually.
Right.
Yeah, I think it depends where your focus is.
Would you have disagreed with me if I'd said the same thing this time last season?
Well, it was impossible that Arsenal could win the league this season.
Yeah.
No, I think Arsenal absolutely started this season thinking they should be competing for the title. I think you can say it's a disappointing league campaign. I don't disagree with that. I'm not trying to absolve any criticism either. I just think that I'm not at the point of baby goes out with the bathwater because they have failed to push Liverpool as hard as I think we all think they could have done. Doesn't to me mean and now suddenly the whole project is gone. I don't think that's the case, and I expect they'll be competitive in the league next season, personally.
Several things. First of all, the complete lack of recruitment. If you want to put the responsibility at somebody's door, it's not Mikel Arteta's. Let's not forget that Edu, who was the man in charge of this, left the club. And that suddenly at the moment where they would have needed his contacts, his know-how, his negotiating skills, he was no longer there to turn to. That's the first thing. Second thing, if Mikel Arteta should be shown the door for finishing second or third or fourth or fifth or whatever, and semi-finalist of the Champions League, every single manager beneath him should also be asked the same question, which is absurd. He has his shortcomings, and the question for me is more, he has his qualities, he's got great qualities, and one of his great qualities, by the way, is that obviously his players are buying into what he's selling them. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, he has shortcomings. He's a man of system. He can be, I think, he can be, yes, one-eyed. His comments about being the best team over the two sides. To be honest, many managers would actually say the same rubbish. But he's too systematic. He doesn't rotate his squad enough. Even in the in-game management, I find him extremely rigid. It's quite extraordinary that you have players like Martinelli and Saka who never, for example, permutate in a game. That is insane when you think about it. And you could go on like that. He's got many shortcomings. But on the other hand, he's brought Arsenal back in the Champions League. They've reached the semi-final, which they lost against an exceptional PSG team, which is the best PSG team in history, probably. They don't have to blush about the circumstances of their exit. And when it comes to the league, well, if Arsenal have had a terrible season, what can you say about the others? I mean, man, Maresca, bye-bye. Guardiola, bye-bye. Anyway, they'll be in the championship next year, won't they? All these things. You can say, again, he's not perfect, but he's certainly a very fine manager. And it's the question whether the shortcomings that he has is big enough to realize, to have some self-criticism, and to have people around him who tell him, by the way, maybe you could have done things differently. And if he can grow with that, then he's absolutely fine. So yes, of course, keep him.
I think the difficult thing isn't that the manager, with their direct rivals, has no shortcomings. And when Tottenham win the Europa League and then the Champions League next year and the title, anyway. Part 2, we'll ask Nicky about Inter. Welcome to part 2 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Look, Nicky, we obviously spoke at length about Inter Barca yesterday, but you must have some thoughts, because and why not talk about this game again and again? It was absolutely unbelievable, and it was interesting when you said Arsenal aren't young, they could develop. And I was thinking, God, if you compare it to Inter, that Arsenal team have got 35 years before they get to this, Inter level. It was an amazing game, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, the Inter Arsenal thing is interesting, because Inter went to that final 2 years ago, and there was a lot of talk at the time they went to that final and that was their one chance, and that's it. They blew it. They're not going to get back there again anytime soon, are they? And here they are 2 years later, and listening to Arteta and his post-match comments. Listen, I think there's some things it's very easy to roll your eyes at with Arteta, and I think that's slightly just how he is sometimes. He's got that way of being very one-eyed, I'd say, and that can cause you to roll your eyes, but also trying to tell everyone that his team had been great and they should feel good. I understand wanting to reinforce the positive parts of an experience, and I think that something that Inter have done so well is take lessons from 2 years ago and not allow it to be a case that it was a one-off story, and tell themselves they could get back, tell themselves, look, we were good enough to be here, we've learned some lessons and we're going to do it. They've been extraordinary in this competition. I think I'm going to say this is a stat that was said to me while we were recording Matchday last night, and I haven't gone back and double checked it, but I believe it's correct that Inter have only been behind in this entire competition for a total of 9 minutes. That's how rarely they've been behind, which is extraordinary when you think they did concede quite a lot of goals between the quarterfinal and semi-final, but they were always in positions of having gone ahead first. So other than that last one, that put Barcelona 3-2 up briefly at San Siro. So they have been absolutely, I think, one of the two best teams in this competition. I think we have got the two best teams in this competition going into the final. If anything, I would argue that Inter have been the better team through the whole competition, because PSG started slowly, right? PSG started a little bit slow. I think PSG have probably been the better team in 2025, and that might be all that matters, because the final is in 2025. So it's not as a case of me saying that, Inter should win, they're the best team now. But I do think Inter's run through this tournament deserves all of the praise it's getting and then some, because they have done absolutely everything that's been asked of them, including playing a couple of Premier League teams in the group, including playing Bayern Munich, including playing Barcelona. They have been really, really resilient, sometimes chaotic, but always with the answers when they've needed them.
What was the moment for you yesterday? If you could, the Acerbi moment, surely it's just amazing, right?
Yeah, of course. I think that goal is just so ridiculous in absolutely every way, because what's he doing there? He's not supposed to be there. He's a centre-back. He's 37 years old. It's the 182nd minute of the tie. It's 6-5. And his finish, which he hasn't scored at all in more than 60 European games, is on his weaker foot, by the way. That's not his strong foot, his right foot. And it's a really good finish. It's right into the top corner first time. It's everything about it doesn't make any sense. But as I wrote yesterday, it makes sense because Inter's shtick, Inter's sense of self has always been about being Pazza Inter, the crazy club. And even I think within Italy, there's just such maybe it's overplayed, but there's this natural contrast you want to draw between Juventus, who hammer the winning isn't an important thing, it's the only thing that counts, which is the famous Boniperti line that became their club's motto. Whereas Inter are Javier Zanetti, I think his book was titled Vincere ma non solo, which is winning, but that's not the only thing. And I think that this Inter really embodies some of that real Inter spirit, and Acerbi possibly most of all.
I wanted to ask Nicky about the name of Lautaro's physio, because that's extraordinary. Lazarus Martinez. I mean, how is that possible?
I can't comment on the name, but it is a great name.
It is absolutely extraordinary to see him. But the other thing I was to ask you, Nicky, is there any chance with what they've done this season, being in the Champions League final, that perhaps, just perhaps, the level of antagonism, and sometimes worse than that, towards Inter might subside a little bit in Italy? Or are they just as detested as ever?
I think Italian football will always have its internal hatreds, which are very strong. And I think there'll be plenty of Italian football fans who are not cheering for them in this final. There may be some conflict for lots of people in Italy, because Donnarumma, peculiarly, I always think, is one of these oddly unpopular players. Not odd in some specific fan bases cases. Obviously, Milan felt aggrieved about how he let Mino Raiola steer him towards money rather than to becoming the club legend that they wanted him to be. And there was the whole Donnarumma thing. But I do think Donnarumma, for a keeper who was literally the player of the tournament when Italy won the Euros, it is odd how his position in Italian culture is much more someone who gets ridiculed for making blunders sometimes, and it is someone who gets celebrated as an extraordinary goalkeeper. So yes, what the exact leanings of everyone will be for the final, I don't know. But I don't think you're going to rip out centuries of Campanilismo anytime soon. I think everyone's still going to cheer for who they cheer for and hate who they hate.
We're not going to preview the Europa League or the Conference League, because we're going to do a special after the games. It's quite sometimes a good time to do them. Man United 3-up against Athletic Bilbao. Spurs go to Bodo 3-1. No Maddison, no Bergvall. Fixtures moved already. Utter panic amongst Tottenham fans. Chelsea 4-1 up on Djurgården in the Conference League. Let's talk about the Club World Cup and the World Cup. We haven't done a whole lot on this, Philippe. Mexican club Leon finally lost their legal match against FIFA on Tuesday. It wasn't a game, their legal match against FIFA's lawyers. They lost 2-1 after extra time. They're officially out of the Club World Cup. So then MLS side Los Angeles FC or another Mexican team, Club America, will likely be the late replacement in the US next month after a yet-to-be-scheduled one-off playoff. I was trying to work out, Philippe, is this just a playoff invented out of the sky? Like, it just could be, we're going to do Freiburg versus Ipswich Town to see who the last team to get in is? Or is there a reason why these teams...
Or Tottenham against Bodo Glimt.
Yeah, there we go. Why not?
Well, no, it was expected there would be some kind of playoff, but it must be said that the regulations around this Club World Cup have sometimes flabbergasted people who looked at it. Like, you will remember that Inter Miami got their ticket for the competition despite the fact that they didn't win the competition that really designates the actual best USA team. But there you go, MLS team. In this particular case, what happened was that Club Leon and Club Pachuca are part of the same group of clubs. They're owned by Grupo Pachuca. And in this case, which of course is a problem, but is a problem that everybody knew would happen from a long, long time ago, because everybody knew they're not exactly hiding the ownership of the clubs. We knew that two of the clubs taking part in the Club World Cup would actually belonged to the same people, and that was in contravention of the statutes of the competition. But instead of that, FIFA just carried on. The draw was made, and it's only after the draw was made and then a recourse was put at the Court of Arbitration for Sport by a club called Liga Deportivo Alajuelense, which is a Costa Rican club, who said, hey, come on, guys, we can't have two teams with the same owner competing in the same competition. And you know what? They're right. So how do you extricate yourself from the situation if you're FIFA? You decide on a playoff, you take out, Club Leon, and then you go to LAFC, which is the team of Hugo Lloris and Olivier Giroud, who is actually rubbish there, I'm sorry to say. Basically because they were the runners-up to Club Leon in the CONCACAF Champions Cup in 2023. So that's clear enough.
Right, okay.
And then Club America, which is another extraordinarily popular Liga MX club, so Mexican club, were the highest ranking team in the FIFA Club World Cup Confederation at the conclusion of the 2024 CONCACAF Champions Cup. That's a little bit long-winded and so forth, but basically they are two of the best teams. And even though the regulations which are invoked to bring those people together are confusing, to say the least, it kind of makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that we're the 8th of May, the competition is starting next month, and we haven't got a clue when the playoff is going to take place. And it's absolutely extraordinary when we had always known there would be a problem. But that's FIFA for you.
Donald Trump convened the first meeting of his administration's 2026 World Cup task force on Tuesday, flanked by Gianni Infantino and JD Vance. It's headed by Andrew Giuliani, part of the Giuliani US political dynasty, if it's a dynasty. America will welcome the world.
Not anymore.
America will welcome the world, said Infantino. Everybody who wants to come here to enjoy, to have fun, to celebrate the game will be able to do that. And then JD Vance said, we want them to come, we want them to celebrate, we want them to watch the game, but when time is up, they have to go home. As someone always, any great party. It's actually how I would invite people round, to be fair. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said that most inner city transportation issues would be solved with buses, and that no long-lasting transit projects would remain as a result of hosting the tournament. Sounds a lot like they're planning to deal with the 2 million predicted visitors by laying on a few buses, a replacement bus service across the states.
That task force, so Trump is the chairman, JD Vance is the vice chair, and as you say, Giuliani Jr. is the executive director, so he'll be doing all the work and in charge of everything. And his sole qualification for the role seems to be that he's quite good at golf. And plays with Trump occasionally. And Trump has said it will be the bigliest, safest, most extraordinary soccer tournament in history. Will create 50 billion in economic output. I'm not sure what that means exactly. And almost 300,000 jobs. Philippe, do you know? So usually when the World Cup goes to a country, they don't have to pay tax. They make up all these laws so that they get all the money. They're not going to get away with that in the States, are they?
Well, yes. That's
okay.
Because when the United States bid for the World Cup, they were fully aware of the regulations in place and the fact that the FIFA traveling circus, moves into town. It's almost like another country moving in, and which has got its own tax status and so forth. And every time this has happened in the past that it's been discussed, it's basically a no-no from FIFA because it is the number one income generator for FIFA, and they want all of the cash. And but those claims are made for every single competition. It's absolutely ludicrous. Of course, the jobs that will be created, the 300,000 jobs might be jobs for the duration of the tournament, which will disappear once the circus has moved out of town. Also, you will remark that at no point do any of these people mention the fact that there will be actually quite a few games played in Canada and Mexico, which is quite hilarious. And as for the income generated by that, I would imagine that it's not income, it's more what is a projection of the amount of money that the visitors are going to spend when they go to America before being deported to El Salvador. So those figures are plucked out of the sky, make no sense, but we're used to that. And by the way, for Giuliani Jr., it's not that he played a little bit of golf with Trump. He actually played. He was Trump's number one partner when he was already in the first administration, because he was part of the first administration as a special advisor. And they would actually, sometimes the two of them travel to Mar-a-Lago to play, a round or two or three at Trump's golf course. So he's the number one golfer, which makes him, obviously, in the Trump administration, eminently qualified for such a job.
And it's probably worth mentioning, Baz, isn't it, that Trump wasn't aware of everything that was going on within the world of football.
Yes, he was unaware that Russia are currently banned from participating in the World Cup, and seemed quite interested when it was confirmed for him. So he might make moves to try and get them in, even though qualification has started.
Anyway, that'll do for part 2. Part 3, we'll look ahead to the Premier League weekend. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So look, the race for 5th place. Man City go to Southampton. They should win that. Forest are home to Leicester. They should win that. Newcastle home to Chelsea. This is the big one, isn't it, Baz? Win that and you're basically there.
Win that and you're basically there, and draw it and you're not basically there, but you're considerably more there than you would have been if you lose. Because Chelsea and Newcastle both have a much better goal difference than Forest and Villa. Considerably better. So that's worth a point to them as well, you could say. But yeah, it is a big game, because if either of them lose, it could have disastrous consequences. I'm not suggesting for a minute they're going to go and play for a draw. I'm not even being sarcastic when I say I'm not suggesting for a minute.
Yeah.
But a draw would not be the worst result for either side, certainly.
The next disgrace of Gijón, isn't it? That's what's going to happen.
Where I'm looking, that game is at Newcastle. You'd have to fancy them at home, wouldn't you? I think.
Totally. Villa go to Bournemouth. They're on 60 points. They're 3 points behind. So looking tricky for them. Bournemouth in the race for 8th, which is very tight. Bournemouth, Brentford, Brighton and Fulham. Just 2 points separating them. Fulham home to Everton. Brighton go to Wolves. Brentford go to Ipswich. Liverpool Arsenal, I guess, is one of the least interesting first v second for a long, long time, isn't it? Can't see what Sky go title decider.
Can I ask, by the way, why is the Newcastle-Chelsea game on at noon on Sunday?
I don't know.
I know it means we have a day off, Max, but apart from that,
just to test the Chelsea fans.
That ideally would be the 4:30 one, I suppose.
It's an early start, isn't it, for your Chelsea fans to get up there for midday. Philippe, you wanted a quick mention of Paris FC, promoted to Ligue 1 for the first time in almost half a century.
Well, I mean, that's for the first time since 1990. There will be 2 teams from Paris in Ligue 1. If there is still a Ligue 1, if we haven't gone bankrupt yet, if we have found a broadcaster, which is not obvious, but Paris FC, which has got some big means behind them, like the Arnaud, the billionaire, is one of them. Is
that his name? Arnaud the billionaire.
Arnaud the billionaire. Actually, that's a great name, isn't it? It sounds a bit like a Viz comic, doesn't it? Character. And so yeah, in 1990, you might remember, or you might not remember, but you might have heard of Matra Racing, which was this kind of artificial club which had been created by Lagardère with players like Luis Fernandez and Enzo Francescoli, which died a death basically. But this is the first time, PSG are going to have almost on their doorstep a club that is also will represent Paris, and which is actually Paris's historical club with Racing. And that actually has made me think, if they make, because you might have heard that PSG want to leave the Parc des Princes. I mean, they're absolutely mad. But they want to leave the Parc des Princes. And they want to build a new stadium about 30 kilometers away from the capital.
Oh, don't do that.
Maybe we'll talk about this is another pod. But Paris FC plays in Paris. Paris FC is Paris. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating. For the first time ever, when you think about any other European capital, they've got tons of clubs. We only have one, but now we have 2, and it's Paris FC.
Let's finish with an email from Luke, who says, hi, Max, Barry and the Football Weekly posse, if you're happy to be in a posse, Nicky and Philippe. Long-time listener, second-time emailer here. Second time. You may or may not remember the first time when I asked Barry for his well wishes in advance of marrying Kamini, pronounced like Carmony, there you are, last year, and he was clear our guests would be put out at being invited to a 2-day wedding during the Euros. It made our day. Fast forward to this year, and we welcomed baby Milo into the world on the 19th of April. And I come to you once again, cap in hand, asking for any words of wisdom and or begrudging well wishes as we start this new chapter together. Football Weekly continues to provide light relief, entertainment and hot takes as we navigate through the lack of sleep and routine of feeds and changes. Thank you all and keep up the good work. Luke, Barry, do you have any begrudging well wishes for Luke and Carmony and young Milo?
Well, I thought this was going to be our first ever oh, thanks for the well wishes, but sadly we've got divorced now.
Oh yeah, please, if you are one of those, if we have wished you well and things have
gone pear-shaped
on the
as
rocks,
I
going
predicted.
badly, we'd like to, yeah, like all life happens. No one's to blame, but we'd like to know about it.
Yeah.
No, they're still going strong.
Well,
guys.
clearly so. And the arrival of Milo will undoubtedly test their mettle. I know, Max, that having children has been a source of total unbridled joy for you.
It's a piece of piss, Barry. That's what it is.
My advice, Luke and Camino, is to do the polar opposite of Max and don't behave as if you were the first person in the history of the planet to sire offspring or to breed. People aren't that interested in your child, particularly when it can't speak and ruins your social life and thereby extension the social life of your friends. So yeah, just be nice to Milo. I hope bring him up well, but don't bore everyone to tears with, oh look, he smiled, oh he took a step, oh. No one cares.
Thanks, Barry. All right, well that'll do for today. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Nicky.
Thanks.
Thanks, Philippe.
Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Baz. Would you like me to send you some more photos?
Yeah, please do.
Ian and Willie together. Yeah, will do. I'll inundate you. Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Phil Maynard. We'll be back tomorrow for our Europa Conference League special.
This is The Guardian.